Saludos, saludos, buenas tardes a todos. Saludos, saludos, ¿cómo están? Espero que estén súper bien. Feliz, ¿qué día es hoy? Hoy es jueves. Feliz jueves a todo el mundo. Sé que se están conectando en audio algunos de ustedes. Bienvenidos, bienvenidas, bienvenides. Qué bueno verles por aquí. Esta conversación la vamos a tener en inglés para poder llegar a una audiencia mayor. Así que si quieres escuchar esta presentación en español, solo tienes que ir a la parte inferior del Zoom, escoger español como idioma y ahí vas a poder escuchar la traducción simultánea. El resto pues se queda en el canal, escoge el canal de inglés y van a poder escuchar esta presentación. So welcome everyone, glad to have you here. So we're going to be talking about the current state of Puerto Rico's energy sector and its alternatives into its transformation. My name is Glenis Pagan. I'm the Executive Director of Filantropía Puerto Rico, a philanthropy support organization whose mission is really to connect philanthropic entities to amplify their voice, their impact, their diversity, in issues of equity, social justice, racial justice, transparency, participation. The purpose of these conversations, of these webinars that we always do is really to provoke a different thought, a different perspective, and have informed conversations of issues that affect Puerto Rico. So we're super glad to have everybody here. Today we'll be talking about power, the electric grid, the energy sector in Puerto Rico. And I mean, this is something that affects us all. Just recently that we had the pass of hurricane, well, it wasn't hurricane, it was a storm. Laura, it was just the day after the storm that I lost energy for 2 days, and not during the storm, but after. And then 2 weeks prior, we had another storm and lost energy. So we can say that we're definitely kind of experts on this issue and dealing with not having energy. But I think it's important that we become experts in really understanding everything that's going on in this sector, and understanding and knowing about the decisions and actions that are being taken by the Power Authority, by government agencies, and also to know and be very informed of organizations that give a different proposal, that are working diligently to transform this, the energy sector, and give it a very, not only a renewable perspective, but a perspective of equity and full participation and just system for everybody. This conversation is in English because I know there's many people and organizations that want to support Puerto Rico in these issues, so we want to inform them as well and join them in the conversation. So I am personally very passionate about this, this issue, and I am honored, grateful, and in admiration of the person that's joining us today to begin this conversation. Ingrid Vila, welcome. So glad to have you. So awesome. Let me tell you a little bit about Ingrid, the very humble bio that I have, because it's longer than this, but Ingrid Vila has a bachelor's degree in civil and environmental engineering from Cornell University and a master's degree in environmental engineering with a specialty in water resources from Stanford University. She is co-founder and president of CAMBIO, a nonprofit organization based in Puerto Rico that promotes sustainable and responsible actions. Ingrid actively supports environmental justice communities, including those that have been defending against a waste incinerator proposed for Arecibo, and those suffering from coal ash disposal consequences in Peñuelas. She serves as urban water ambassador for the revitalization of Martín Peña Channel and neighboring communities in San Juan, and on the advisory council for the Puerto Rico Urban Resilience to Extreme Sustainability Research Network. Together with other environmental, labor, and community groups, as well as energy experts, she organized and contributed to the development of Queremos Sol, an energy sector transformation proposal for Puerto Rico based on the use of distributed, clean, renewable resources. It's an honor to have Ingrid getting us started in this conversation, which I really hope that inspires and leads us to action and to continue to being involved and present in all the decisions and actions that are being taken from this sector. We will be taking questions at the end of this presentation, so please use the chat. I know it's a different format that we're using, but please use the chat to get all your questions, and I'll be back at the end to moderate those. So Ingrid, I'll leave it to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenise. And thank you, Philanthropia, and everybody who's joining today for the opportunity to speak about this very important issue on energy on the island. I will be sharing with you a presentation to guide us through this discussion today. Let me start by sharing here. Can everybody see the first slide? Okay, perfect. So like Glenise mentioned, I'll be talking today, providing an energy overview and an update on what has been happening in Puerto Rico since 2018 till today, because this past week has been quite an active one. So I've had to update this presentation quite a few times up to the last moment, just because issues and news regarding energy continue to develop on a daily basis. Let me see. Okay, there we go. So today I'll be talking, giving a brief overview on PREPA conditions so that we all refresh our memory in terms of what are we talking about when we talk about the electric sector. We'll be talking also about decisions and main transactions in the past few years and the role of organizations and community groups in those decisions. And finally, I'll be providing some insight into alternative electric sector transformations and initiatives being derived and led through community groups, organizations, and labor groups. So first of all, we cannot talk about Puerto Rico in the past few years without thinking everything that has been occurring on the island, starting with some man-made events, which I refer to the fiscal situation, which obviously prompted the enactment of PROMESA and has had definitely an effect on PREPA and the electric sector. Obviously, corruption issues that have come to light, particularly in the electric sector. We cannot forget either Whitefish or the Cobra transactions. Obviously, the summer of 2019 has impacted not only PREPA, but Puerto Rico as a whole. And in terms of natural events, well, there is a before and after in Puerto Rico, marked by the September Hurricane Maria in 2017, as well as the seismic events earlier in 2020, and obviously what we're going through today in terms of the pandemic event with COVID-19. So all these things that are happening, all of them have an effect and influence decisions and steer things one way or the other within the electric sector. So when we talk about PREPA, we're talking about quite a complicated system with a generating capacity of over 5,000 megawatts. Although the available capacity is really about 3,000 megawatts because there are some units that are out of service. It has about 2,500 miles of transmission lines, 30,000 miles of distribution lines, over 400 substations. And on revenues, we're talking about quite an impressive budget of $3.5 billion a year in revenue. So just by looking at that, you know that this is going to be an entity that is the focus and attention of many groups and people. Peak load for 2019 was 2,700 megawatts, and that has been decreasing In the map, as you can see, you will see the main facilities, generating facilities on the island. We have some on Mayagüez, Cambalache, Palo Seco. I can see this one because it's my screen is there, but you have there the San Juan units, Aguirre, Ecoeléctrica, Costa Sur, and the AES facilities. Those are the main facilities that provide generation on the island. And unfortunately, still that generation is based mainly on fossil fuels, 98% of that, 40% still petroleum-based, almost 40% also natural gas, 18% coal from the AES facility, and just over 2% on renewable resources. And in terms of the distribution of load and customers, PREPA has 1.5 million customers approximately, of which 91% are residential, but the load in terms of demand mostly lies on the commercial side, with over almost 50% of the load corresponding to that sector, and then 36% corresponding to the residential portion. Load has been declining since 2012 and is forecasted to continue to decline. And I don't know if you're able to see the graph on the lower right-hand side, but it shows the reduction on headcount since 2012, which has led to basically a reduction in 2,400 employees at PREPA, which corresponds to a 30% reduction on headcount, which is quite dramatic. In 2018, you may recall, after Hurricane Maria, the governor of Puerto Rico, Ricardo Rosselló, announced that he was proposing the transformation of the electric sector via privatization, and Law 120 of 2018 was enacted just a couple of months after that. It was done mainly to deflect attention from disastrous emergency response and the inability to provide adequate power service to the entire island on a timely basis. No studies were conducted on the benefit or cost of privatization, and the reason we know this, and I can attest to this, is that we carried out a request for information process with PREPA that we had to we ended up in court in order to get access to some of the information regarding privatization. And as part of that process, we required and we requested PREPA to provide us reports and analysis on the benefit cost of privatization. And PREPA's response was that they did not have any. The judge asked them and requested that they provide a certification to those effects, and such certification was provided. So we have a certified document from PREPA indicating that there was no benefit cost analysis on privatization. So clearly this is not, the privatization motivation was not the product of an analysis or any sort of evaluation that would present that the result would be beneficial to Puerto Rico. As part of Law 120, an energy public policy was adopted, which ended up being Law 17 of 2019, and I'll speak a little bit more about it ahead in the presentation. In 2018 also, you may recall, there was a controversy of the Energy Bureau and the Energy Commission. Up to 2018, we had an Energy Commission, and there was a change in law, and an Energy Bureau was then created, and new members were put in place, now with five commissioners leading that entity, and that is the regulator currently of the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority. Also, in 2018, although this started in 2017, but I guess it caught more momentum in 2018, the debt restructuring agreement. You may also recall that PREPA has a $9 billion debt, and that the Fiscal Oversight Board has been trying to move forward with this. So that's a major thing that happened during that time period, as well as the IRP, which I will be talking about also a little bit ahead on the presentation. PREPA in 2019 presented a draft IRP that has been evaluated through an Energy Bureau process, which included public participation. Main transactions in 2018 and 2020. First, the conversion to natural gas of San Juan 5 and 6, which was a contract awarded to New Fortress Energy. The most recent concession of the transmission and distribution system to Luma Energy. PREPA also renegotiated, and this was an announcement made earlier in the summer, renegotiated 500 megawatts or large-scale PV systems. These are systems that, projects that initiated in 2011. It also pursued natural gas mobile generation units to be leased at $70 million per month. This was a project that was a result after the seismic events on January 2020, and Costa Sur went out of service. PREPA, instead of looking to repair Costa Sur, decided to pursue this transaction. And also the extension of the Ecoelectrica contract and the LNG import, which was due to, that contract was due to expire in 2022. And PREPA extended it to 2032. Regarding the generation units, I have to say that through public participation and through a process in the Energy Bureau, we were able to motivate, I would say, both the Bureau and PREPA to cancel such a process. So fortunately, PREPA then steered their efforts to repairing Costa Sur instead of, which would cost $25 million, the repair of Costa Sur, versus investing $70 million per month for 18 months on the lease of these units. So public participation does work. Law 17 of 2019 was enacted, like I mentioned, in 2019, first, I think it was February 2019. And when it was announced as a Green New Deal for Puerto Rico. And the reason the relation was made is that you may recall also that Alexandria Ocasio had just presented a couple of months ago a Green New Deal for the United States, and such a relation was made. However, this is, the Law 17/2019 is hardly a Green New Deal. It's an energy policy to support public utility privatization. It's an obscure process. It requires dual fuel conversion of existing units, meaning increased investments in fossil fuels. RPS, which is the renewable energy goals, are presented more as an aspirational goal and not really binding mechanisms to be able to adopt it. It exposes agricultural and ecologically sensitive areas for large-scale PV systems instead of concentrating on rooftop solar. Private contracts, and this is something that we could talk about further, but I won't get too much into it, but private contracts can actually be excluded from the IRP, which is the long-term plan for resources on the island. And obviously there's no approach in terms of handling adequately labor union protections as part of the privatization process. So clearly it was not a Green New Deal. And when this was first presented and the Senate started the process, this is October 2018, at the same time, we presented Queremos Sol. And I won't talk about Queremos Sol now, I'll be talking about it a little bit further on the presentation. But I just wanted you to know that just when this legislation was enacted and was presented to the public, we had presented, along with a multi-sectoral coalition, an alternative to consider both to the Senate and to the government. So one of the other transactions that I mentioned was the PREPA bond deal, and this was presented by the Fiscal Oversight Board, along with PREPA and the government of Puerto Rico. And the bond deal pretty much establishes a 2.8 cents rate increase in 2020. Obviously, there have been delays in the implementation and adoption of the RSA. That's the acronym that is used for the restructuring deal. And they have not been able to secure the restructuring deal through the Title III court that PROMESA and the process that PROMESA provides. So that has not started, but it includes a 2.8 cent rate increase that rises to 4.5 cents in 2043 until the debt is paid off, and it really has no limits into the increases. So obviously this restructuring agreement is contrary to what we should be trying to pursue, which would be either a stabilization or a reduction in our rates. Bondholders in this restructuring deal will be paid off first. They will be paid before pensions, before labor, and even before system maintenance, which is quite counterintuitive if you think about it, because if you're a bondholder, one would assume that you would prefer to ensure the long-term maintenance of the asset that you're investing in, and yet this restructuring deal leaves that for a lower priority and gets bondholders paid first. It includes a solar tax, which is something that we have been talking about a lot publicly, and anybody who produces energy through a PV system would have to pay the bond charge. And it is obviously a regressive charge because it will be uniform for everybody and will affect low-income customers disproportionately. And it is worse than the 2018 RSA that was actually rejected by the Fiscal Oversight Board. And I just present here two news pieces in which we contributed, raising our voice against this transaction. And as I move along on these transactions, I'll be showcasing not only what has been presented, but also the work that communities and different groups have been doing in order to raise the concerns that these various decisions imply for Puerto Rico and for the benefit of the people. PREPA'S IRP, another main action that PREPA pursued in the past few years. It originally was a natural gas proposal. And as you can see, this is a table in which I summarize all the new natural gas investments that PREPA proposed in its IRP. We're talking about 2,000 new megawatts of fossil fuel, natural gas in this case, and $4 billion investment. This was clearly not the plan that the people of Puerto Rico in general, I think, thought of would be ideal, particularly after experiencing Hurricane Maria, and after, I think, the incredible interest that has arisen in terms of renewable energy. But this is what PREPA presented. Just to give a brief background, the IRP, for those of you who are perhaps not too familiarized with it, it's the Integrated Resource Plan, and it's the planning tool that defines PREPA's investments for the next 25 years, with a 5-year very specific action plan on what it's going to be investing in and where PREPA is going to put its efforts in terms of asset investments. The IRP is a plan that is presented to the Bureau, and the Bureau then opens up a public participation process for comments. And CAMBIO, along with other organizations and several other, there were many interveners in this process, participated actively in the process that started June 7th, 2019. And part of our participation was building effective public engagement, and we did so by creating social media platforms and information, covering all public hearings and events live through Twitter. We then provided also briefs on summaries of the main points discussed during these public hearings. We convened communities to provide them information and to alert them on the importance of this long-term tool and the importance of participation. And I have to say, and this is something that just happened this week, that participation does work, because this is mainly the result of that public participation process. Just a few days ago, the Energy Bureau, which I mentioned is the entity in charge of evaluating and carrying out the public participation process for this planning tool for PREPA, announced, and all those red lines you see are the projects that the Bureau rejected, which is quite significant, as you can see. from $4 billion investment, it has been reduced to about 1,800 million investment. Unfortunately, the first project you see there, San Juan 5 and 6, was not evaluated as part of the IRP, which is something that we raised, and was determined and approved as a fixed project on the IRP. So it didn't go through an objective evaluation of benefits and costs. And this is still a concerning project, which I will talk about a little bit ahead. But nonetheless, it is good news for the people of Yabucoa, the people of Mayagüez, who would have had to really create some sort of coalition to be able to handle all these natural gas investments that were proposed for their communities. Alongside with the rejection of these LNG projects, the PREP also mandated that PREPA incorporate from 3,500 to 3,900 megawatts of solar photovoltaic system by 2025. Unfortunately, it is not specifying that it be rooftop solar. And this is something that we will be insisting on, that the preferred alternative should be rooftop and not using agricultural lands or ecologically sensitive areas. The AES coal facility is established in the IRP that will close by 2027, but the IRP, the resolution that was approved by the board, by the Bureau, sorry, also includes a consideration for conversion to natural gas later on, past 2027. And this is something that also concerns us, because at that point, we should really be focusing on renewable energy and not on natural gas. But this is something to be discussed, I think, further on with the Bureau. There's also an approval for $2 billion for hardening of the transmission and distribution system. And this is something that I think we will be seeking more specification from the Bureau to ensure that such investments are directed to strengthen the capacity of the system to accept distributed renewable resources on rooftops. So this is still an ongoing process. Like I mentioned, this just came out. This was actually one of the last slides that I had to modify this week. And now PREPA has a chance to respond to this. They can either agree to it or they can request reconsideration. So we'll be paying much attention to this. Once a final resolution is adopted by the board in this process, then the IRP becomes effective for the next 3 years. Once it's adopted, we will also need to be paying attention in terms of how PREPA complies with some of these aspects adopted in the IRP. The San Juan 5 and 6 LNG conversion, which I mentioned before, that was a fixed decision on the IRP, is a project that was awarded to New Fortress Energy for $1.5 billion. It's a 5-year contract term with 3-year extensions, so a total of 15 years. And through a request for information lawsuit, which I briefly mentioned before, we were able to gain documentation that was not made public. And through that documentation, we produced a report that I highlight there on the top right-hand side, which we produced with IEFA, with the Institute for Energy, Economics, and Financial Analysis, in which we revealed that there was no desirability and convenience study conducted for this project. Just like I mentioned before, there was no benefit cost analysis for privatization. Well, this project did not have that either. If you want to read the report is available at cambiopr.org. But it pretty much created an uneven playing field for bidders, providing NFE confidentiality agreements and awarding them communication that other bidders were not aware of and were not afforded the same benefit. It was approved by the Bureau, like I mentioned, outside of the IRP, and very importantly, with no written determination from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And I highlight this because right now, after we produced this report and made it public June 2020, a couple of months ago, FERC actually issued an order to show cause to New Fortress, indicating that they understood they did have jurisdiction. Part of the irregularities that we found with this project was that all natural gas projects have to either have a determination of jurisdiction from FERC, which is the regulatory agency that is in charge of natural gas transactions in Puerto Rico and the United States, and yet the project was approved by the Bureau, by Puerto Rico's, the PREPA'S board, by the Fiscal Oversight Board, without having any sort of written determination from FERC, and just basing it on supposed conversations that New Fortress had had with FERC that told them that they did not need a FERC authorization for this. And we believe this was not only irresponsible from obviously the entities in charge of approving these, but we do think FERC has jurisdiction. So we're still awaiting a final determination from FERC on this. But if FERC were to claim jurisdiction, then that would open up the process for public participation. This is a project that was not afforded either a public participation process. If you know a little bit about the location, this is right off the San Juan Bay, next to many communities that were not notified of this project and became aware of the project after it was built and announced as operational. Other problems that we found out in this project in our research of public documentation is that the Fiscal Oversight Board approved the project recognizing that the costs were 30 to 40% over market benchmark. This is a project that was announced as a cost-saving project, meaning that once built, it would lower rates for customers, yet those savings are not included in the contract. So there's no guarantee that those savings will actually materialize. And we did identify several conflicts of interest that if you're interested further, you can look into the report or just write us an email and we'll be happy to provide you additional information. But this was a report that we, like I mentioned, we published June 2020 and was widely covered in US and Puerto Rico media. The most recent transaction announced by PREPA, which I'm sure many of you have heard of, is the transmission and distribution concession to Luma Energy, which is also 1.5 billion. One starts to question whether that's like a magical number for PREPA, but it's also a $1.5 billion project for 15 years. And it is composed of a fixed fee of $105 million with some bonuses that Luma can collect if they attain some metrics. Again, no desirability and convenience study performed for this. This is a project that was procured following Law 120, the privatization law. And that law, unfortunately, actually eliminated the requirement for the P3 authority, which is the entity in Puerto Rico, the Public-Private Partnership Authority, that conducted this project. And that law eliminated the desirability and convenience study. This is a contract that, although very limited public documentation has been provided, the P3 authority has only made public the contract and a manicured committee report. Just by looking at the contract and analyzing the contract, you can see that it is biased towards Luma and very onerous to the best interest of the people of Puerto Rico. Again, a project that it was presented as something that would come to lower rates. There is no rate reduction required as part of the contract, and there is no obligation to avoid a rate increase. Labor union clauses lead to breaking the union and debilitating workers' protections. Renewable energy objectives are not included as a metric. And so if Luma does not comply with those renewable energy objectives, there are no consequences. And furthermore, and this is quite concerning, Luma can abandon the contract. Oops, I guess I had a Spanglish issue there. that is supposed to be a THE. The contract under numerous conditions, including if there is an extreme weather condition that affects the island for 18 months, like would happen perhaps under a hurricane, that would obviously affect the electric system easily for 12 to 18 months in terms of being able to put everything back together. They can abandon the contract with no consequences. We have, since this was announced, June 24th, I believe it was, 2020, we have been quite active raising our concerns on this project. We created a change.org initiative. We have written statements to Congress. We have put out press releases, and most recently on July, CAMBIO presented a request for information to the P3 authority. We have not yet received a single document. However, I must say that they have responded that they are working on developing a platform in order to be able to provide us the documentation. So once we get that, I think we will be able to conduct a more rigorous evaluation of this project, its consequences, and whether there were any sort of incongruencies or irregularities in the process. I mentioned before the large-scale PV systems that are also included in the IRP as possibilities in terms of integration of renewable energy. And just this past June, PREPA announced that it had renegotiated 16 projects, large-scale PV projects totaling 593 megawatts. These are projects that initiated in 2011 under the Fortuño administration, after Governor Fortuño enacted or declared an energy emergency that put in place a fast-track process for evaluating all these projects, along with the waste incinerator, which you may recall. And these projects have still been lingering since then without being able to move forward because of complications and mainly because of costs. The costs that were initially negotiated were detrimental to Puerto Rico. And just like I mentioned, PREPA then announces that they had renegotiated these contracts, but our evaluation of those renegotiations is that they're still unfavorable to Puerto Rico. And in this graph, you can see the analysis that we conducted. These are the prices that were negotiated with continued escalators throughout the period of contracting. So even though perhaps the initial contract value of 10 cents per kilowatt hour could be something reasonable, the escalator definitely will increase costs for the next upcoming years. And we compare this with what the cost would be for rooftop solar, which is at about 7 cents per kilowatt hour, 70 cents, sorry, per kilowatt hour, and decreasing. And they're expected to continue to decrease. So why continue to pursue these projects that obviously have embedded increases when you have an alternative through rooftop solar that would derive and bring benefits to the population? We, in June, we denounced obviously this, and just a couple of weeks ago, actually, the Fiscal Oversight Board communicated to PREPA that they were rejecting the renegotiated contracts because, just like we had mentioned a couple of months earlier, it would increase rates. And it is imposing a limit of just 150 megawatts on such transactions. PREPA has since responded to the board saying that they want a reconsideration on that determination by the board. So we will see what finally ends up happening with these projects. And you may wonder why we oppose all those transactions and why community groups have been convening and organizing in order to raise their voices, participate in these processes, present alternatives. And it's because there is an alternative and there's a better one. And here I present pretty much the outlook or what light at the end of the tunnel could look like if we were able to pursue a more sustainable path. And it's an energy sector based on distributed, endogenous, clean, renewable energy, a sector that makes it affordable, that promotes efficiency, ensures equity, obviously ample public engagement, capacity building, and creates local wealth while maximizing on-island ownership. And obviously this is a big bite in terms of a sentence, but this is what is behind our proposal in Queremos Sol. Queremos Sol is a multi-sectoral initiative and a proposal that is derived from the effort of all those entities and many other people and individuals that collaborated in this initiative starting 2018. It is the only grassroots bottom-up proposal for energy transformation that has been presented for Puerto Rico thus far. It is based on studies and data from experts, so we have conducted analysis on the benefits on this. It presents a clear path towards distributed renewable integration using rooftops, accelerated retirement of fossil fuel generation. It retains PREPA as a public entity with a new business model. So we're not talking about keeping PREPA as it is. Everybody recognizes that PREPA needs a dramatic transformation. And I have to say that what is proposed in the Luma contract is not a dramatic transformation. It is just a switching of the hand from a public hand to a private hand, but with little changing in terms of the way things are managed, transparency, and main issues that have caused concern and problems within the utility. It acknowledges fair labor transition and participation. We're requiring, or we would require, a debt audit and almost complete cancellation of that debt. And it obviously recognizes that the energy sector and an energy transformation is a great opportunity for better wealth distribution and to address inequality on the island. And it integrates climate change as a pillar in all decision making. It was curious to see in the IRP, in the resolution established by the Bureau, one of the issues that we raised regarding that PREPA'S IRP had not even a single mention of climate change in a 400-page document that was supposed to address resiliency and transformation of the energy sector post-Hurricane Maria. And one of the things that the Bureau is mandating is that climate change needs to be incorporated in decision-making within PREPA, which is something, a very important statement to consider. It is, like I mentioned, the convening of important environmental and social groups and movements on the island. And the success of this proposal is based on education and sustained public participation, which we have been committed to do since we presented this in 2018. A little bit more detail into Queremos Sol. It presents a technical, a governance, and economic development model that proposes an objective of 50% renewables by 2035 and 100% by 2050, energy efficiency of 25% by 2035, and a clear public policy of efficiency, conservation, distributed renewable generation on rooftop solar, and accelerated elimination of fossil fuels. Like I mentioned, it maximizes and proposes local ownership. And what that means is that communities and individuals become owner of the systems by generating their own electricity through PV systems on their rooftops. And this can be done in various modalities. Obviously, since Hurricane Maria, there have been both individual initiatives and community initiatives. Philanthropy has been quite active in the installation of PV systems in community centers and on residences in several communities. But we know that the transformation of the island cannot depend only on philanthropy. And this is why we presented Queremos Sol as an alternative public policy and a route to follow and a path to be followed in order for PREPA to change its approach to the transformation of the grid and to take a more of a leadership role in the integration of solar rooftop by acquiring these equipment and making it then affordable for the people to install PV systems on their homes and their communities. The governance transformation that we propose maximizes transparency, and it includes the voices of multiple sectors of the Puerto Rican society that are not currently reflected in the current governance structure. PREPA will continue as a public entity in order to provide and supply services while initiating that dramatic transformation in its public model. It's key to success. Is that local and we talk about how because once nothing that we do not control, we do not control the fuel markets, and we're at
Okay, so I think you can hear me. Let's give it a minute. Probably, yes, I think we lost her for a minute. So let's give it a minute. She'll probably be back on. You know, maybe she lost electricity. Let's verify here. Thank you for being here still. Don't forget to be putting your questions on the chat. Yes. Yes, she's coming back on. Let's give her a few. This is what happens nowadays. Yes, thank you for that first question, Janice. Yes, she'll be back. Dun, dun, dun. So thank you, everybody. Good to have you still here with us. Ingrid will be checking back with us in a few. In the meantime, if you could, oh, there she is. Awesome. We still have you on mute. Let's unmute you. There you go.
Sorry about that.
Hey, this is how it is now. No worries.
Yeah. But it was not power, I have to say.
We were joking. I'm like, maybe she lost electricity.
It was not power, it was just the internet. Let me share my screen again.
Awesome.
I think I left it here, right?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So like I mentioned, the last thing that I was commenting on was that we also pursue a strong regulator in the Energy Bureau that will make sure that PREPA complies with, obviously, the plan that we're tracing, and that complies with the renewable energy portfolio as well as the transformation. Okay, so given what you have seen, obviously, what PREPA has been doing in the past few years, and what we have been proposing in Queremos Sol, and what we have been communicating and educating on, you may wonder, well, what's the strategy to steer course? Well, first of all, we continue to develop Queremos Sol as a viable path for a sustainable transformation of the energy sector. And we rely greatly on education regarding efficiency, conservation, renewables and their benefits to communities. Renewable is a cost-effective alternative. And in our education effort, we actually developed this campaign, which we greatly appreciate the support of Filantropia in this project that we pursued. And I just want to show you quickly, you can obviously access the information at cambiopr.org/menos-es-más. And let's see if I don't lose my connection here. But I just want to give you a little bit of a taste of the things that you can find here. This is a campaign that we ran for about 4 months earlier in 2020. And you can find here several guides that are quite useful and make it accessible and understandable in terms of how to select appliances for your home, a guide to energy consumption and how you can lower your energy consumption, and a basic guide to renewable energy and adopting renewable energy for your home. So we developed this, and we carried out a social media campaign to get people to access it, and it has gotten quite a attention and use within communities, and even there's a couple of university courses that have actually referred to the information that we have provided here as part of their courses and their classes at universities. So going back to, okay, so like I mentioned, you can access the guides there, and you can take a further look in terms of options you have within your household. We have also been working on developing financing products that will allow renewable systems acquisition within communities, and we're working with financing co-ops on the island, and we're quite excited to see if we can come up with something that is even more attractive. Financing co-ops already provide options for and tools for acquiring renewable systems to individuals, but we're trying to see if we can develop even something that is more attractive by developing collective rooftop solar model, which is the next thing that we're also working on, which is a purchase model that we're developing with the University Gardens community in collaboration with Solar United Neighbors. We have already organized several community meetings, and there's great interest, and hopefully we'll be able to develop this in the upcoming months. Another project that gets us quite excited, and Filantropia is also supporting, is a distributed energy resource integration study. So it's basically a modeling similar to what PREPA did for the IRP, but in this case, what we're modeling is Queremos Sol. A lot of the responses sometimes we have gotten from PREPA regarding our proposal is that, yeah, but that can't be done. Well, this project, and obviously we know it can be done, but the more tools we have to prove that we're in a better position to defend our proposal, and that's what we want to do. So we have been working with experts in the United States and experts at the University of Puerto Rico in developing this very useful model that we were actually able to work on also as a result of that that request for information lawsuit that we presented against PREPA, in which we were also requiring data from the system. Well, we finally, through the court, were able to get the PREPA data in order to carry out this modeling. We hope to have results by the end of the year, so you will be hearing more about this in the upcoming months. And what do we continue to do? Well, we continue to pursue public participation, transparency, and provide the general public with information regarding decisions being made at PREPA. And currently, we have a request for information, like I mentioned, on the Luma transaction. We continue to work vigorously with all our multi-sectoral allies on the rejection of the bond deal. Obviously, we do not want a solar tax, and we want to defend labor and pension payments. We continue to develop analysis and communication on PREPA-related announcements. Our IRP intervention was supported by the most excellent group and top-notch experts and lawyers, which obviously helped community groups make a great presentation on the benefits of renewable rooftop solar. And obviously, we will continue to participate in upcoming IRP proceedings. We pursue also a strategy to continue to gain support from groups, sectors, organizations on these various issues. And obviously, we have also pursued communication at the DC level because we recognize it's important for them to develop understanding and support on these issues. And just on this last hearing that was conducted by the Committee on Natural Resources, which is presided by Ingrid, Queremos Sol was offered an opportunity to present, and we were represented by Ruth Santiago, which I'm sure many of you know. So I leave you with the Queremos Sol logo. I think with a call to action, not only to learn more about Queremos Sol, which I share with you there, the link, read the proposal. If you think it's something that you would support, sign on to the sign-in sheet that is provided at the website. And not only Queremos Sol, but pay attention to the different decisions that are being made regarding the energy sector. The reason we are intervening, the reason we are actively participating on these things is because the actions and the decisions that are being made today will define our energy sector for the next 20 to 40 years. And what we want is an energy sector that will be dependent on renewables, that will maximize the resources we have, that will maximize the economic benefit derived from that transformation. And that is why it is so important for all of us to learn as much as possible about this and to participate in the way and fashion that we're able to do so. So thank you, and I'll pass it on to Glenys.
Awesome, that was great, Ingrid. Thank you so much. Very enlightening, and at moments I was, I could feel the emotion of some of the decisions that have taken place. So let's go ahead and take some questions. This part's going to be kind of a Spanglish, so we can either go English, Spanish questions. We already have a couple. So excellent, thank you. The current administration in the United States and Puerto Rico have demonstrated little interest in renewable energy. That may change if a new president is elected and or if government changes in Puerto Rico, which we'll see how that goes. This year, 2020 has not ended. What might we still be able to change in the Puerto Rico electric system starting in 2021 to increase renewable energy production? Who are the key players in the policy arena who would need to be involved to achieve the rooftop solar goal?
Wow, great question. So in terms of the political arena, definitely, well, there will be a change in administration, even if there's not a change in the party that is favored. And we have already, not only CAMBIO, but other groups as well, pursued a definition from those candidates and a response in terms of what is their position regarding many of these issues, regarding renewables, regarding natural gas, regarding the privatization of PREPA. There have been responses from some of them. Some of the candidates have already expressed their opposition to privatization, for example, or their opposition to the LUMA contract. Others have been more clear on their commitment to renewable energy. But I think everybody has to be paying attention in terms of the positions that each of these candidates adopt in the upcoming months. We will keep pressuring to have as much of a clear response as we're able to get from them. So, and once we get it, obviously, we will be sharing it with everybody so everyone can make an informed decision on November. But past November, we will go back to the structures that we have been, I think, participating on, and I think to the same methods that we have used in the past few years. It is demanding from the Energy Bureau that it continues to first hold PREPA accountable for the plans and actions, to offer transparency. We will continue to pursue access to public documents and decisions. And obviously, early on 2021, we will go ahead again and pursue the new administration with the Queremos Sol proposal so that it is adopted. And we are just doing that as of right now with the change in administration within PREPA. And we have all re-engaged with the new PREPA director and are requesting a meeting with him. We want to present Queremos Sol to him and to obviously present to him the benefits of PREPA adopting such a path.
Right, definitely, beautiful. So call to action to everybody, be very sure of the candidate's position on this. How the LUMA contract will impact the future of wheeling concept. Even though wheeling was included in Act 73, it was not considered by PREPA due to many reasons. I'm not aware what wheeling concept is.
Yeah, well, I think that is not necessarily defined on the LUMA contract, and it is still on the hands of the Puerto Rico Energy Bureau. And I think that is an important issue to continue to pursue within the Bureau to ensure a prompt attention on the wheeling issue.
Okay. Soon after Hurricane Maria, the San Sebastian mayor took the initiative to create his own power company. What's stopping other majors from working on their own energy initiatives like rooftop solar within their own municipalities?
I think it's a matter of resources on the one hand, and there are communities, just like I mentioned, there are communities taking the initiative to pursue rooftop solar, and there are also municipalities that are initiating such conversations and such planning steps. So I don't think there's anything stopping them other than perhaps limitations in terms of funding or waiting to see what happens at the PREPA level. And how that would affect their commitments or their investments regarding electric sector transformation.
Yes. Do you think, is there any opportunity in the short-term period to determine the REX price and activate the benefit for the PREB?
Could you say the first part? Sorry, you got
so, I mean, I'm not the expert, but do you think, is there any opportunity in the short-term period to determine the REX, REC price to activate this benefit by the PREB?
Well, I mean, the REX right now, at least in the renegotiated contract, these are the renewable energy credits. And in the renegotiated large-scale PV contracts that I mentioned earlier are established as a fixed price, which is something that if you're going to have a REC system, the way it works in other places, it's left kind of like to the market to determine the price of that. I do not know what the PREP has done regarding RECs. I think I would have to look into recent proceedings to see if they have established anything specific regarding that recently.
Cool, good. So, and I think this is appropriate, what can the general population do now to help with the effort to pursue renewable energy solutions?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yes.
Well, first of all, learn more about these things. Share it with your neighbors, share it with your family.
Talk
Like
about
I
it.
mentioned, yeah, go to the Queremos Sol website, learn about that proposal also, familiarize yourself with it. Go to CAMBIO's webpage. We have a bunch of information on the IRP, on public documents that we obtained from PREPA, and just make this part of the public conversation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this is a subject matter that PREPA and government officials have tried to exclude the general public from participating actively on. So I think it is really important for us to engage in this conversation and not to feel excluded. It gets kind of technical, or it can get technical, but it is also very tangible. I mean, it's something we use every day. It's something we need for our day-to-day life. So make it a tangible thing for you and engage in a public conversation.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I kind of said. You know, we're all experts. At this point, we might not know REC and PREP and, you know, kilowatts and all that, but we have the, you know, the effects on it. We are experts on those effects. So we can definitely talk in that respect.
And I would mention something additional that I think it's attainable for everybody, and it's efficiency. Sometimes when we talk about renewable energy, well, some people might say, well, that I have to make an investment for that, and maybe well, first start with energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is lowering your demand, is increasing your capacity to use your funds for something else, you know. And I do recommend that people go to our guides, the guides that we provided, because it provides really simple things that perhaps we don't think about when we in our day-to-day lives, but it's something that there are measures and actions that we can take starting today. After this presentation, when it's done, there are things that you can do right away to improve your efficiency.
And just even recognize how much you consume. I think that's a way. Okay, we have a couple of questions coming in. Mini switch. ¿Han considerado alianzas con el sector privado para comenzar la transformación casa por casa instalando los sistemas?
Bueno, y la contesto en español también.
Sure, yes.
Parte del proyecto que estamos desarrollando en University Gardens, pues definitivamente que tiene un componente bien importante, que es los instaladores de sistemas fotovoltaicos, ¿no? Estamos en el proceso de organizar la comunidad, proveerles toda la documentación, la información, crear el grupo para entonces sacar una solicitud de propuesta, y es el sector privado el que en este caso estaría haciendo las instalaciones. Así que definitivamente que la interacción y la participación del sector privado, particularmente los instaladores locales, en este proceso de transformación es clave para poder mover. Es una de las modalidades, no es que sea la única. Como mencionaban anteriormente, para nosotros es bien importante que la autoridad también tome un rol protagónico en la compra de equipos, porque en la medida que una entidad con la capacidad que tiene la autoridad haga una compra a gran escala, pues definitivamente que los precios mejorarían muchísimo y así haría mucho más asequible el acceder a estas tecnologías para todas las poblaciones. Pero eso no resta que el sector privado pueda tener un rol importante en ayudar a comunidades e individuos a tener acceso a estos sistemas fotovoltaicos.
Sí, y lo que mencionaste hasta de financiación, que también es parte del sector privado.
Definitivamente.
El incremento en instalaciones en techos trae consigo asuntos técnicos de la necesidad de mejorar la infraestructura para que esté apta a recibir la capacidad añadida a nivel local. ¿Queremos Sol tiene alguna idea de cuánto podría ser el costo aproximado de dichos arreglos? Más cuando la nueva ley de interconexión y medición neta establece que dichos arreglos serán al costo de la compañía que somete el caso ante la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica, lo que se traducirá en transmitir estos costos a los clientes. Uf.
Pues precisamente para eso es que estamos haciendo el trabajo de modelaje, porque queremos ver qué es lo que le haría falta a la red o qué inversiones se tienen que hacer en la red, particularmente en la red de distribución, para asegurar que esta integración agresiva que se propone en Queremos Sol de sistemas renovables brinde confiabilidad también al sistema, porque no es para, lo que queremos es redundar en mayor resiliencia, en reducir vulnerabilidad. Así que queremos asegurar que la integración redunde en mayor confianza y seguridad en esa red eléctrica. Así que la respuesta precisa a esa pregunta se la debo tener en unos cuantos meses cuando hayamos completado el modelaje y entonces podamos ver bien cuál es el tipo de inversión que haría falta a esa red. Y eso me ata con lo que les mencioné anteriormente sobre la inversión de $2 billones que está proponiendo el negociador de energía a través del Plan Integrado de Recursos para la red eléctrica. Pues una de nuestras preocupaciones es que a falta del modelaje, porque la autoridad no lo tiene, nosotros lo estamos haciendo, pero la autoridad no lo tiene, pues entonces nos preocupa un poco que se vaya a hacer unas inversiones para asegurar una infraestructura que a donde va dirigida es a un sistema centralizado y no a un sistema centralizado, quiero decir, como el que tenemos ahora, ¿no? Que dependemos de unas facilidades grandes de generación centralizada y no necesariamente una inversión dirigida a potenciar estos sistemas distribuidos en los hogares y en los techos de los hogares y los comercios.
Sí, para mí eso del modelaje con enfoque renovable y de distintas soluciones es, o sea, tú no haces un modelaje para sacar precios y plan, tú haces el modelaje para ver la mejor solución y poder hablar informadamente y elegir el mejor diseño. Así que ese proyecto es como que maravilloso. Dentro de su propuesta, ¿cómo evitarían incrementos en costos de energía para las personas que no pueden costear un sistema de energía solar?
Bueno, la propuesta busca que todos podamos tener acceso a estos sistemas fotovoltaicos, ¿no? A largo plazo. Y la idea también del modelaje es cómo asegurar esa integración. O sea, el modelaje también te resulta en un costo y cómo ese costo entonces se va distribuyendo a través de los años. El modelaje, por ejemplo, de la Autoridad de Energía Eléctrica que realizó con el IRP, mostraba una inversión requerida de $14 billones, que se distribuye entonces en el plazo de tiempo correspondiente. Pues nosotros tendremos un resultado de una inversión que se tiene que hacer y entonces pues eso se distribuye a través del periodo de tiempo del modelaje y de esa manera entonces podremos ver cuáles serían los costos resultantes y cómo se manejan para asegurar que no hay una carga excesiva en ninguna población.
Ok, algunas preguntas más antes de terminar. Hemos hecho muchos comentarios por aquí, les agradezco. I stepped out for a minute. I believe Luma estimates that an investment of 12,000 million is needed for grid modernization. Considering the fiscal situation of PREPA and the government of Puerto Rico, what is the strategy proposed by Queremos Sol for grid modernization projects that are needed now until we build a more fertile ground among the public, private, nonprofit sectors and citizens for adopting and financing the rooftop solar strategy? It's like, what's the middle ground between?
Bueno, so, if I understood correctly, Luma, and not only Luma, but PREPA is basing their medium and long-term plan on federal funds that should be arriving as a result of the reconstruction post-Maria.
Right.
And our point is that those funds would be better utilized if they were invested towards a grid that serves distributed solar. What we're saying is it's not that you need to look for additional funds. It's the funds that you will be receiving or the funds that you have. For example, like I mentioned, PREPA already spends over $2 billion in fossil fuel purchases and power purchase agreements. If you're able to lower such dependency by installing rooftop solar, then those are $2 billion a year that you can start investing on the grid and investing on the installation of rooftop solar. So, I mean, there are several initiatives, but in terms of what LUMA and PREPA would be pursuing, the issue is how you use those funds, whether you use it for a centralized system or whether you can use them for a distributed solar system.
Awesome. Yeah, the magic number for PREPA, of course. So one last question. Let's see. Let's see if I have. Federal and state governments have been providing financial incentives to citizens to encourage solar energy adoption. What incentives would you recommend the government of Puerto Rico provide to help individuals with going solar? And this is our last question.
I think there are not enough incentives in Puerto Rico, actually, for individual rooftop solar adoption. There was El Fondo Verde, you may recall, from a couple of years ago, but that actually ran into problems. And I think there are a bunch of people who actually have not received the funds, even though they complied with everything. So there has been quite a few issues with that. But within Queremos Sol, we do present several structures in terms of incentives and federal programs that government and PREPA should be pursuing and that they have not tapped into, that could definitely provide additional funding to make it more affordable for people to adopt these systems.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Ingrid, for that. Any last comments or call to action to this wonderful group here with us today?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for participating and providing me the opportunity to give you a brief overview of what has been happening. Like I mentioned, it is a brief overview because a lot of nuances and a lot of other issues have been happening on the past few years that have really kept us on our toes all the time. And if you want to learn more, feel free to contact us via email, via Facebook, via social media. I do encourage everybody to learn as much as you can about this issue. And like I mentioned, be part of the public conversation on energy. It is very important for all of us to engage on this because we all depend on this, and the decisions being made today will not only affect us, but it will affect our children and our grandchildren. So I thank Filantropia for this initiative, and obviously welcome any other comments or questions that you may have, and you can send them, I guess, to Glenis and Filantropia, and I'll be happy to respond to those also.
Yes, awesome. Again, thank you so much. And like I said, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Hopefully we can do this again and maybe talk about proposals from the new government candidates and see what's going on there. Maybe.
And do stay tuned, I have to say, and pay attention in the upcoming months to our modeling results, because I think that's going to be some quite exciting information that will be derived from that initiative.
Awesome. We'll stay tuned, and then we'll probably want to do something just to see those and keep that conversation. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We'll send you a feedback form for you guys to fill out, and we appreciate your input. So have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you.